Good morning, everyone. My name is Tayo Oyedeji, and I'm here to talk to you briefly about one thing. Well, let me start with a small story, just so that we can all be on the same page. A couple of days ago, about 3 days ago, someone sent me a message, and this gentleman had attended the 2020 version of the One Thing session. And in the message he sent me, he basically said that his life began to change that day because he chose a really, challenging goal, focused on it throughout that year, and in his view, that one year changed his life forever. And the same thing happened to me, and I'll walk you through how I think about this, the things that happened to me, and how I think about the future in terms of who we are and what we can do. So, welcome to One Thing. I hope we would all learn together and have a good time learning. Thank you. So, let's get started. So, I want you to imagine that you spend every single day of next year working towards one big goal, one goal that's important to you. Now, think about that. How much progress would you make if you focus every single part of your being towards one key strategic goal for one whole year? We've all heard about the 10,000 hours it takes to become a master in anything, right? And so, to a large extent, you've chosen that one goal and you said, this is what I'm going to pursue for this year. I want us to think together, how different would our lives be? How much better would we be, especially if that particular goal is very strategic? Right, so today we're not talking about New Year resolution because we're moving close to a new year and everybody starts coming up with new resolutions about things to do. Instead, we're looking at a strategic direction, a clear, focused path that leads us forward. And then we're looking at ways to execute that path so that we can all be successful. You see, most people don't fail because they dream too little. They fail because they dream too much at the same time. I was listening to I believe it was Trevor Noah talking about how all our dreams are possible, but not at the same time. And then what we have to do is sort of to scale it and say, which one am I going to focus on now? Which one am I going to chase? And what are the things that are going to be important for me as I move into this aspect of life? So one meaningful goal for 2026 is what we're trying to get together. At the end of this, you live with that. You get a strategy and execution roadmap that will help you to execute that plan, a 90-day action plan, and perhaps more importantly, you get a personal contract that you sign with yourself that says, this is the thing that I'm going to focus on as I move into 2026. So this isn't just a talk, it's a transformational workshop that I hope will help all of us focus a bit more as we move into that year. Well, we all know that New Year resolutions fail. I have a friend that owns a gym somewhere in America. And he says that at the beginning of each year, they literally rent new equipment so that they could have a lot more equipment, knowing that by the time it's February, they have to take those equipment out. Because New Year resolutions, everybody says, I'll get fit, I'll get in shape. They all show up in January. By February, they all stop showing up. So they have to return the equipment that they rent. And so 80% of all New Year resolutions actually die by the middle of February, right? So it's not having more goals, it's about having fewer, but better chosen ones. Why do they fail? I think people have too many things going on in terms of goals. There's no systematic approach, and so motivation dies very quickly. And willpower is not something that I would always have. But more importantly, life itself is a distraction, and there are so many things that distract us. And so I'll tell you my own story and how one thing actually started in my life. The year was 2002, right? And at the beginning of that year, I wanted to decide again. I was having a strategic session with myself, trying to build all the resolutions I wanted to make, the things I wanted to change, the things I wanted to focus on. And as I was putting all of them down, it occurred to me that it's almost impossible for me to focus on every single one of them. And so I chose one. I said, this year, I'm going to spend the entire year studying for the GRE. That's the graduate exam for to get a master's, especially if you're studying outside the country, in America especially. And then I'll study for the GRE and get a master's degree in America so that I can earn a scholarship to do that. Now, keep in mind that what we often do is we say, what are the 6, 7 things I would do to improve my life or to build my future or whatever. But this time around, it was one single decision, one single goal. Now, that goal would have multiple iterations of things that need to be done to achieve it. But it's one clear challenge with one measurable outcome, and that decision changed my life completely. So what it meant was it then had to become a daily thing where you're building the things that you do on a daily basis, right? And so I had to learn new words for the vocabulary section of the GRE every morning. In the evening, I spent a lot of time studying for the exam, reduced distractions, stopped going out a lot, and then treated it like it was something that I had to do. It wasn't something that I wanted to do, but it was the one thing that I thought could change my life. And so I gave it everything. I remembered back in those days, I used to, if you know Lagos, I used to live with my sister in Aja, and I was working in Maryland, and I didn't have a car. So it meant getting on the bus at about 6 a.m. in the morning, getting to work, working till about 8 or so, and then getting back on the bus. It used to take me I'll get home at about 10 p.m. plus or minus. And then I would have to study between 10 p.m. and about 1 a.m. in the morning, sleep for about 4 or 5 hours, and then get back to work the next day. Right, so that happened for about 6 to 7 months of that year. And that was all I did. That was the one thing. That one thing literally changed my entire life. Right, so the result was finally I got a score that was very high in the GRE, got a full scholarship to go study in America, opened up opportunity for my master's, PhD, and everything else. So that one choice, that one thing to a large extent, that year changed everything as far as my life was concerned. And so since then, what I've tried to do is to focus on one big goal per year. Every single year, I would say, what is the one key thing that I want to achieve this year? So for instance, 2005, it was about my PhD. 2014, I wanted to move back to advertising. And so that was my goal. So what would it take for me to get back to move from financial services into advertising? 2020, I wanted to build a fintech. 2022, my goal was to go back to corporate. So what was that going to take to do that? So one thing, 1 year, one major achievement. What then begins to happen is it begins to cascade. So that by the end of your life, or which is very far for many of us, but in a few years, you look back and you'll be like, I've achieved so many important milestones. And I'll speak to some of these as we move forward. And so it's time to reflect. I've been talking quite a bit, so I'll give you some time to think now. And this is the crux of this session, for us to think together. What would you do in 2026 if it's impossible for you to fail? If it's impossible for you to fail, I want you to just think about it. And if you've got a pen and a paper, just write it down. If it's impossible for you to fail, if anything you do is going to be successful, what are the things, or what is the one thing that you focus on doing? If it's impossible for you to fail. Now there may be 3 or 4 things. Just go on. Keep writing them down. Don't make it just one thing. If you know that you cannot fail, what are the things that you try to do? Be honest with yourself. I know mine. I've been giving this quite a bit of thought. But if it's absolutely impossible for you to fail, what are the things that you try to do? What are the things that you'd focus your 2026 on? And so we're just starting, because I could go on and talk, but the goal is not for me to talk a lot in this session. The goal is for you to reflect and make decisions, and then eventually be able to say, this is the one thing that I'm going to focus on in 2026. So there are many goals potentially that you could choose. It could be something in your career. It should be a financial goal. It could be health. It could be something around learning. It could be around relationships. It could be around your faith. It could be around your business. But if you could just narrow it to 3 key things that you would do, 3 key things, if you know that it's impossible for you to fail. And so we've moved to the workshop component of this. The initial part was me just telling you why this is important and how I think about this. Now it's time for you to do some work to ideate and come up with some of these things that would be really, really important. So before I move forward, my assumption now is that you've been able to identify two or three things. Three is the optimal number that you would do if you know that it's impossible for you to fail. Three big goals, three big amazing things that you'd achieve if you know that it's impossible for you to fail. Now I want you to look at those three things and subject them to 5 key tests. And these are the tests that I always use whenever I'm making decisions around things like this. The first is this going to fundamentally change my life? Is it going to alter my future path significantly? And for me that year, doing the GRE well, getting a scholarship was going to change my life completely, right? Will success in this thing make everything else easier for me to achieve? So if I'm successful in this one key thing that we thought that I chose, will it make everything else a bit easier for me to succeed? And does it require sacrifice? Does it require me to give up something that I typically want? Will it trigger a domino effect that if I achieve this one thing, then I'll be able to achieve other things? And then can I get some progress in 90 days? Now I want you to subject all your 3 things to this test and see which one of them passes the test. So which one of them is big enough that it will make a significant change in your trajectory, that it will create leverage, that will make other things easier to do, that will require you sacrificing some important things and trigger a domino effect so that other things that you want to achieve are achievable, and then that you can sort of in 90 days achieve some kind of progress. If you've gone through this model, you should be looking at something that scares you a little bit because it's big enough to make a change in your life. It's big enough to create leverage for you to be successful in other things. It means that you would have to do some things sacrificially to give up some things. It's big enough that if it falls, if you achieve it, it will make all the other dreams that you have come true. And then you can begin to work on it and begin to show progress in 90 days. If you follow me this far, I think that you should be close to identifying that one thing that you can put your 2026 towards. And so I'm not going to do it for you. You'd have to do it yourself. Write it down right now. So my one thing for 2026 is this. I know mine. I've written it down. And then just take some time to think about it, right? Is it worth pursuing? Is it big enough? Is it going to make a change? Is it going to be something that you can that you can sacrifice towards? And is this something that's worth pursuing for you? And so we'll move to the place where we talk about executing that one thing, because everybody has ideas, everybody has goals, everybody has opinions, everybody has things that they want to do. It's about the execution. And again, I'm talking about this because this is 23 years ago, but I remembered that as I was leaving as I was leaving Nigeria for the first time that year, I had a really good friend. It was a medical doctor, and very, very smart, very, very good at everything. And he said, Taya, I'll join you next year, right? Because he just basically said, show me what you did. And then I told him, I said, bro, I gave a whole year to this. And these are the things I did that year. I remember coming back to Nigeria 8 years later, and it was still exactly where it was. Because it's not about making that decision. It's not about saying, I want to go achieve this. It's about the things that need to be done to ensure that you achieve it. So every dream needs structure. The strategy could be great, but implementation is where things work or fail, right? So what I would ask you to do is, and this was something that I always did, and I still do, whenever I want to achieve something big. I want you to assume that today is December 30, 2026, exactly 1 year from now. And you've been able to achieve that big goal that you always wanted to achieve. What will be true about your life today? Remember December 30, 2026, not 2025? What would have become a lot easier? What problems would have disappeared? And perhaps more importantly, who would you have become? So think about it and just visualize it. And this is the way I visualize in general. So I'll take that one goal or one big goal, I'll write it up in a really bold print and put it somewhere where I'll see it every day, either on my computer. Sometimes I'll make it my screensaver on my computer. I'll put it in front of my bed so that when I wake up in the morning, that one big goal is what I'm seeing every day. So you can visualize it in the future, but you have to visualize it every day. So you have to see it every day. I remembered the first day when I became managing director of Stockholm Media Perspectives. I remember walking into my office and it was like deja vu because I felt like I'd been in that office several times and I'd never actually walked into the office before. But I had walked into that office so many times in my mind that it was like, oh, I've been here. And I remember looking around like, how come I know all this furniture? How come I know where my secretary sits? How come I know? And it was really weird. But it was that weird because I had seen it so many times that when it finally happened, it was just like, another thing. And so you need to be able to visualize what you're doing and where you want to go. So your one thing also needs support. 4 key things. You need some skills. And so the question to ask is, what must you learn if you're going to achieve it? What competencies must you develop? Right? Because one of the things that I've found very, very, I'll give an example. So I've spent quite a lot of time working in advertising, but I always worked on the media side of advertising, right? And so when I became group CEO at Publicis Nigeria, one of the first things I had to do was to work on the creative side, to lead inside Publicis, our flagship agency, but more importantly, the one agency that has defined creativity in Nigeria for a really long time. And so what it meant was I had to literally go to school for almost 3 months before taking that role, just studying creativity, studying the great work that had been done in Singapore, that had been done in Paris, the work that had been done in London, understanding how people thought about copywriting, what art direction meant to them, how they dealt with their best clients. Just basically studying all the principles that's required for me to be successful if I was going to lead inside Publicis. Right? So again, it's about knowing what your one thing is and then asking what are the skills that I need if I'm going to be successful about it. If you don't do so, otherwise it's just a dream. It's never going to happen. Then the second one is what's the network and what are the mentors that I need? That's one thing that I do very well. Even just yesterday, I went to lunch with a gentleman that had already achieved some of the things that I'm planning to achieve next year. And it wasn't just lunch, it was for me to tap his brain to understand how he thought about certain things, to understand his perspectives, so that to a large extent, when I get into the thick of doing it, I've already heard the thoughts and ideas of people that have already been successful in places that I wanted to be. What are the systems and tools that you need? Software, space, equipment, just whatever it is that you need to make that thing happen, right? So if it's studying for exams, I'll give an example. If you're studying for the GMAT, for instance, obviously there's something called the GMAT Club where you can network, but more importantly, you can find the systems and tools that's required. If your goal is financial, for instance, right? Then what are the systems and tools for investments that can help you to be successful in that regard? If your goal is a career goal, right? What do the people that are very successful in your career, what do they know and what do they do? And how can you know and learn the same things? If it's relationships, what do people that are successful in relationships do to help them be successful? And then finally, finance and investment and time. Now that's the key thing. Where will the hour come from? Especially for those of us that are full-time workers. I've heard this 1,000,001 times. Where will I find time to do it? Well, I can tell you that during the course of my career, I've started about 7 different businesses. And each time I'd found the time to do them. Because if it's important to you, you find the time to do it, right? You find the time. Some have been successful, others have not been, but I'm grateful for the ones that have been successful because they more than made up for the ones that haven't been successful. But the bottom line is that everybody has time. We just choose what we do with it, right? We all have friends that spend 6-7 hours every weekend watching football or going to parties or doing one thing or the other. And so the question we all have to ask is, Are we going to spend and use our time, or are we going to invest it? That's the key thing, because time is a resource. Are you going to spend it, or are you going to invest it? So I remember the very first major business I started was a software business. And at that time, I was working in financial services and I wanted to build a software business. So, what it meant was, and I'm talking about financial and time resources right now, what it meant was I had to take 50% of my salary every month to pay the salaries of the people I hired to work in that software business. So, at that time, I had about 4 software engineers, and I had to take a significant portion of my salary because the business wasn't making any money, and I'll take part of my salary and use it to pay their salary every month until the business became successful. And then what it also meant was that I would work 9 to 5 at the software business, and about seven or so, I would then start working till about 10 p.m. on the software business every day. And then, of course, my weekends were just devoted towards it, right? So the question to ask is not, do we have the time? Because 7 to 10, I could be watching TV. We do have the time. It is just what we choose to do with it. And I think those are the key things that I wanted to mention. So I'll give one strategic example again. In 2010, my one thing was to launch a fintech business because for some reason, at that time, I built a reputation in which I was sort of at the intersection of finance and technology. And I thought, well, what then do you need to do? Build a fintech business, right? And that fintech business today is Bravewood, which I'm grateful it's quite successful and doing well all by itself, right? And so the skills I needed was technology, right? Tech mastery. I needed to understand tech in a deep, abiding way. I needed business mentors, people that had done things like that. I remembered sitting at lunch with the founder of Cowrywise, for instance, who was someone we're going to be competing against. I spent a lot of time talking to other people that had built amazing business. I remember meeting with a professor at the University of Wisconsin to sort of try and understand how we thought about the fintech ecosystem. And I took the time to understand that ecosystem in Nigeria, in other parts of the world, so that when I got into it, I wasn't just some human being. I knew enough about the system to be successful. And I remember giving about 25 hours outside of work every week, nights and weekends, towards working and building this, platforms, hire developers, work with them. I mean, this was probably my 4th or 5th business that I was building, and then build a list and all those other things. And so the one thing that year was to launch a fintech business, but doing that meant a number of other activities that were required to make sure that worked. So one thing doesn't mean you're just doing one thing all through the year. It means that this is the one focus of the year, but there are 1,000,001 other things, not 1,000,001, maybe 100 other things that you have to learn and do to be successful at that one thing that's important. I'll say this, if it costs nothing, it changes nothing. So whatever it is that you want to achieve, you kind of have to give up something. Otherwise, it's not going to be successful. So what will you give up to make room for you to be successful? Netflix binges and mindless scrolling? Social media hours and digital distraction? Weekend chilling and resting and sleeping in? Or commitments that drain you without providing any form of return? So you'd have to write this down yourself because I can't do it for you. You'd have to say, if I'm going to be successful at the one thing that I've chosen this year, what are the things that I have to give up? I'll give an example. Just early this month, I remember working on a new project, and that project required me to learn a new skill. And I remembered being in the office every single weekend, learning that new skill until it became a part of me, right? I think that a lot of us think that when people do certain things, it's just because they're naturally gifted at it or they're just good at it. No, they're not. The truth is they've sacrificed something to do it, right? I love watching football, particularly enjoy watching Liverpool and Arsenal. And I remembered there was a weekend that I was in the office working, and I was like, Arsenal's game is about to start. And I literally had to say, bro, just finish this stuff. You watch the highlights. And I remembered how much pain that doesn't seem like a big deal to everybody. But at that time it was really painful for me. Because what it meant was giving up the 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 2 hours that I would have spent, watching that game so that I could catch a 10 minutes highlight later in the day. If it costs you nothing, it changes nothing, right? I know. Let me say something about digital distraction, and it's something that we're all susceptible to, right? Every single one of us. Give us a phone. Oh, this is one interesting one. There was a study that was conducted that showed that young people's propensity to date and marry reduces with access to cell phones and internet access. Why? Because the things they were going to search for outside, they could find on their phone, right? And so just, scrolling mindlessly was as much fun as going out to meet somebody else, right? And so what it means is that this thing we call a cell phone is so dangerous for our life in many ways, for our life of achievement in many ways, because then it begins to take a lot of our time, begins to take our lives until we're not able to do the things that is required for us to be successful. So now we're at the back end of this. I think what I've done is I've walked you through how I think about this. I've walked you through the process for selecting your own one thing. Now I'm walking you through how, in my view, you can make it work so that you can be successful at it well. So the one other thing I'll say is that you won't succeed because you feel like it, because you won't feel like it a lot of times. You won't feel like doing what you need to do. You succeed because you do it anyway. You choose to act even though you don't feel like working. You choose to do what needs to be done even though you don't feel like doing it. And that discipline is what builds freedom for you. When you're disciplined in doing the things that you need to do, especially when you're young, you find out that when you're 60, 65, you don't have to do the things that you have to do. Instead, you're doing the things you want to do. I'll tell you a story that I find really interesting. So in America, there's a big store called Walmart, right? So Walmart is where you go to buy literally everything. Walmart is like a big superstore. It has every single thing you want to buy. And when I first got to America, one of the things I noticed was that in Walmart, there are always a lot of old people standing in front of it and just greeting you as you're going in. I think they're just greeters. That's what they're called. But usually they're in their 80s and they're in their 90s, maybe even 75 and above usually. But they're not in their 60s. They're usually like 75, 80 plus or minus. And I remember one day I think I'd started my PhD. I was in Missouri, and I talked to one of the gentlemen, and I said, "So, why are you doing this? What's this about?" And he says, "I'm doing this because I didn't do the things I should have done when I was 30." And that stuck with me so much. He's saying that I have to work in my 80s because I didn't do the things I should have done when I was 30. And I remember walking away from it and saying that would never be me, right? And just being more focused on saying, what are the things I should do in my 30s? What are the things I should do in my 40s? Now I'm going to be 50. I'm going to be 50 next year, which is amazing. What are the things I would do in my 50s? Like we said. So now when I'm talking, I'll say 50 is the new 40. But it's just a way to make myself feel good that I'm getting old. Yep. So discipline is more important. And so the final component of this is break it into 90-day sprints and say, so I've got this big goal for 2026. What am I going to achieve every 90 days? Right? You see, in financial reporting and business management, we report on a 90-day basis every quarter, primarily because it makes it easier to track our goals and objectives for the year. Right? So your Q1, you're building systems, you're building skills, you're getting early wins so that at least, you're building towards what you want to achieve. By Q2, you're a lot more consistent, you're refining the things you should be doing. By Q3, you're trying to expand and optimize what should be. And then by Q4, you should be seeing some good results, right? So that's sort of the way I see the 90-day thing. So every 90 days, you're saying, what am I working towards in terms of my big goal for the year? And very important, I'm not granular enough to do daily executions, but what I try to do is weekly actions towards the things that are important to me, right? So every week, I try to do 1 to 3 things that move me towards that big goal that I'm looking for. So, so action one, something that sort of gives you leverage towards your one thing, something that supports it, and something that you're learning or whatever. So every single day, every 7 days, it's about trying to say that within every 7 days, are there 3 things that I'm doing that will move me towards this big goal that I've itemized for myself. In closing, you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your systems, right? So you don't suddenly become this wonderful goal that you set for yourself, right? You build systems that help you to be successful towards them. And so you remove frictions, you remove the things that make it difficult for you to make the right choice, right? So you remove the friction between you and doing it. So for instance, if your goal is to lose 20 pounds, for instance, or 20 kg next year, I'm giving that as an example. Well, one friction may be going to the gym. So one way you could do that is say a friend should call you up every morning and say, let's go to the gym together, right? That kind of helps. And then you add support. You find people, reminders, people that you're walking the same journey. I always try to do this, right? I hardly ever start any business alone. I always look for people that were thinking alike that we can build together. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But to a large extent, it's a way that ensures that there's always somebody that I can work with together to build amazing success. And then finally, design your environment for success, right? So structure your environment, your schedule, and the place around you towards helping you achieve this your one thing. You get a copy of this, and this will be sent to you later today. But it's important to do your 2026 contract. And I'll walk you to the things that will be in the contract, right? So you write it, you sign it, and then you go on and do it. So the first part of it is my one thing for this year. What is that big, audacious, scary goal that you want to achieve? Then 90 days from now, what are the things that I want to do, that I want to have achieved on them, right? Every week, these are some things that I plan to do towards them, towards that big goal. My sacrifice, these are the things that I'm going to sacrifice so that I can be successful in achieving this goal. Support the system, these are the people or the things that will support me in achieving that goal. Now, this is the most important component of this contract. Start date, tomorrow morning, I will do 1, 2, 3 things. I'm just going to pause here briefly and tell you how I think about this. If you push it till next week or after the new year or whatever, the likelihood is that it just goes the way of life. The way life goes, just move on with your life. And so here's the commitment I'm asking from you. Do something towards that goal tomorrow. The one big thing that you've chosen, do something tomorrow towards it. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be a small thing. It could be a search, right? So maybe you're moving industries. Your goal is to move to another industry. It could be searching for people that work in that industry so that you could talk to them. Or your goal is to start a new business. It could be searching for who are the people that work in this, who are the businesses that are successful in this industry. Whatever it is, do something tomorrow morning. Not tomorrow evening, not in the afternoon. Do something towards it tomorrow morning. And then when you're done, sign your contract, hang it somewhere, and every day next year, take a look at it until we're successful together. So I'll bring you back to where we started from. What would you do in 2026 if it's impossible for you to fail? It's one thing for 1 year, for one life, because that's all we have. And if you do it well, you look back at the year and be like, oh my God, this was an amazing year. I think one of the things that I'm grateful for is that at the end of each year, I take some time to think through and strategize and think about what happened last year. Has it been successful? Have I done some of the things that I wanted to do? Have I achieved some of the goals that I set for at the beginning of the year? And I'm really, really grateful for 2025 because it was a really, really difficult year in many ways, but it was also a very, very successful year. And my prayer is that 2026 will be that and more for you. That you'll be able to look at that one thing that you've committed to in that one year, and that your life will be much more productive because you've been able to achieve that one thing. Thank you very much. I hope you learned a little bit from it. So there are certain things that are available after at the end of this. I'll send you the full presentation deck. Um, I'll send you a more comprehensive workbook, and I'll send you a month by month strategic planner that you can use to sort of track these things that we're doing. So it's your move, it's your moment, it's your year. Please make sure you start tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. God bless you. I hope you've had a good, I hope this has been good for you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.